Welcome to InFocus. It's a close look at human relations presented by the Cincinnati Human Relations Commission. I am your host, Chris Stiles, and on today's program, we are taking a look into the transgender community, some of their struggles and their achievements. Our guest today is actually Tom Jenkins from PFLAG and City Council member Chris Silback. Thank you so much and welcome to InFocus.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, you're more than welcome, more than welcome. I am really interested in this subject. So I know the show isn't as long as I'd probably like to talk, but let's jump right into it. First, could you please tell us what PFLAG is?
Okay, PFLAG traditionally stands for Parents, Families, and Friends of Lesbians and Gays.
Okay.
Notice it doesn't include the T, and so the national organization is actually going to drop that tagline and just use PFLAG. But PFLAG started in 1972. We've got 350 chapters and 200,000 members nationwide. The local chapter started 30 years ago. In August, September, we'll celebrate our 30th year. Awesome. So we've been around a while. But we have a threefold mission: support, education, advocacy. Support, we have a monthly meeting. We usually have a speaker, but always part of is to just break into small groups and share our stories. And that helps parents, families come understand, talk to other folks about some of these issues, or gay and lesbian folks trying to figure out how to come out to their own families, sometimes come to our meetings.
So now we're at a point, I guess you can say, in the world where we are adding more people, more types. And I don't want to say genders because there's a difference, but we're adding transgender to the acronym LGBT, which is lesbians, gays, bisexuals, and transgenders. But now it's becoming a lot more popular.
Right. I mean, as you said, there's a huge difference between sexual orientation and gender identity. Mm-hmm. And the LGB, lesbian, gay, and bisexual, all focus on the sexual orientation element, and transgender focuses on gender. And so the way to explain it is, sexual orientation is who you're attracted to. It's, it is something about sex. It's, who turns you on. While gender identity has nothing to do with sex or your sexual, who turns you on. So gender identity is who you identify as either masculine or feminine, either a man or a woman. So it's all about your gender and what your brain and your soul identifies with. And then the sexual orientation can be different for people, for transgender people, just like it can be different for cisgender people, and that's another term. So cisgender means that you identify as the gender you were assigned to at birth. So I was assigned male at birth.
Okay.
And I was delivered, and the doctor said, "You have a son," mm-hmm. and I identify as male. So I am cisgender, and that's the other thing is, we are not here as transgender people. We are here as allies to the transgender community, and therefore we are not experts. I don't want to speak for both of us, but I will say that I think we're learning as we go as well, and this is something that's new to a lot of people, and we want to be allies to the transgender community.
So as we speak about the LGBT, there's a continuance to that acronym that I recently learned. It's the LGBTQIA. Is that
right.
accurate? Okay, so what does that mean?
So lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, mm-hmm. and then the other part of the acronym is Q is questioning. So people who have not decided to be labeled, LGBT or T. QI is intersex, which means that you don't identify as either 100% male or 100% female. And maybe I'm getting this wrong, but I just want to make sure. And then A is ally. So the A is a big part of our community. I mean, we have a lot of people who say, I want to be supportive of gay and lesbian and transgender people, and we want to include them in our community. So the last acronym A stands for allies.
So that would be us.
Yes.
Is that us?
Well,
okay.
Yes.
We fit in here somewhere.
Yes, for sure.
Now you said the Q was for questioning. That kind of threw me off because it's changed over the years. I thought that when you weren't sure, maybe you were testing the waters or something like that, that it was more a bi-curious thing. But now it's questioning.
Right. I mean, so there's a lot of people who aren't ready to self-identify as even bi or gay or lesbian. And, sexual orientation is a process, just like going through puberty and figuring out, what's going on with your body and what does it mean. And that can take some people a lot of time to figure out what it all means. And so before someone's ready to self-identify or put themselves in a box, they're part of the questioning community.
Let's talk about labels. We were speaking off camera in reference to, what's okay to say, what's okay to not, what's bad to say, or what people identify with. We were talking about the word queer because I thought the Q in LGBTQIA meant queer, but it means questioning. Is queer a bad thing?
Well, so it depends. I mean, for a lot of younger people, that's a word that they have embraced and feel empowered by, taking a word that was once a negative name for the gay community and said, we own it now, and that's how they identify. I will say that for people in my generation and probably older than me, it's still not okay to use the word queer. But I think words are, what the meaning are behind the words. So if there was someone who I knew was a true ally or a member of our community that just used the word because that's part of their vocabulary and had no ill will behind it, it's one thing. But if it's used in a way that it's supposed to be demeaning, of course it's not okay.
So what other terms are there?
To me, what's also happened is that the community has tried to take that term, which had negative connotations, and turn it into one and embrace it as a positive term. And I've heard it often enough, and I've seen it in, say, student groups have made it part of the name of the group, that at this point, for me, it doesn't bother me. But 10 years ago, 20 years ago, probably would have had a different meaning.
Speaking of 10 or 20 years ago, how much of a difference have you seen that PFLAG has made in our community, especially since Cincinnati's so conservative? To bring PFLAG in and for so many people to be a part of it now, has it grown a lot?
I mean, Cincinnati has a lot of different aspects to it. I mean, since I live outside the county, but Cincinnati had a city ordinance or a city amendment that Chris and others helped overturn. We have a huge pride celebration. I was talking to somebody the other day who had just moved back from California. Said, this was a person that came to speak at our meeting. Cincinnati's been very welcoming to her. So I don't make, there's certainly conservative elements here in terms of LGBT issues, but I wouldn't classify Cincinnati as all that conservative.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, so first of all, PFLAG is the lifeline of how we have been able to come out as LGBT people and be accepted and supported and loved. We've come a long way in the last couple of decades, especially in the last 10 years. And I think it's attributed to because, I don't think we've made so many strides. And by the way, Cincinnati was named the most LGBT inclusive city in the country.
Really?
A couple months ago by the Human Rights Campaign. We were the first city in the Midwest to have transgender inclusive healthcare for all city employees. And so I think we've really turned the corner from maybe a more conservative past. But, PFLAG, I think we've come so far, not because of politicians or judges or, the government, but because more people have come out. And this becomes about your neighbor or your coworker. And of course you say, well, my next door neighbor, they deserve to be treated equally under the law. And so it's become a personal issue. And I think a major catalyst for that is the fact that we've had PFLAG that allows parents of gay and lesbians or friends or gay and lesbians themselves and LGBT people to have a place to talk about their feelings and what does this mean and how do I deal with it? Maybe I want to accept my son or daughter, but I don't have the tools to do it. And PFLAG and the work that they've done has just been an incredible part of that.
So I know that at one point, society had a problem accepting LGBT. And T being the lesser, transgender, but that's what we're talking about
the harder,
today.
Yeah,
the harder, thank you. How much of a difference is there now between, I want to say the two, because transgender, you said, was about not your orientation, but actually your gender. So how much of a difference is there now? Is there really problems in our city alone with employment, with benefits, with things like that when it comes to transgender as opposed to lesbian or gay?
I think if you look at the process and the progress, transgender community is going through issues today that the gay and lesbian community went through 10 years ago or so. And it's just those issues about healthcare and benefits and acceptance in the workplace, acceptance in other ways. But there's also been a huge change just in the last couple of years, with the attention being brought. I mean, certainly Leo Alcorn's death made a big difference locally, but even, the president's statement on transgender equality mentioned her. So, what's happening here has made a difference nationwide, I think, in bringing the issues surrounding transgender to people's notice.
How long has the term LGBT been used? How long has it been around?
I don't know the answer to that question,
Okay.
but a long time. I mean, we've always included the T in part of the LGBT community. I mean, as far as I know, so decades. But it definitely has not been given the focus that
was my-
lesbian and gay
that was my next
rights
question.
have. I mean, and it is still very difficult for many people to be lesbian or gay. I mean, I get calls and emails and messages from people who feel like they've been discriminated against in employment and housing weekly. And Ohio and many states still do not have protection against discrimination. It is still legal in the state of Ohio to fire someone just because they're gay. So marriage equality is coming next month, and someone at their workplace could go on their lunch break and get married to their partner, come back, and their boss could say, "Where'd you go to lunch?" And they say, "Actually, we just got married," and you could be fired for that, for coming out. So it is still 100% legal in the state of Ohio to be fired or denied housing because you're gay or lesbian.
That's absurd.
People assume that it's different, but for transgender people, it's still very tough. I mean, there's very simple things the transgender community deals with, like pronouns. So getting the right pronoun, whether it's he or she, or if they identify as them, there's pronouns that so them or they is a non-gender pronoun that some in the transgender community.
I'm confused.
Sure.
I'm confused.
So,
is that referring, when you say them or they, is that referring to one person?
yes.
Could you explain
Well,
that?
it's not the only, if you look up gender-neutral pronouns, you will find a number of different systems, some of which are still singular, but they're words that you're not familiar with. And so for a lot of transgender folks, I think, rather than pick a word that people don't know, they'll pick the plural, use the plural pronouns as singular.
Yes. Because them or they is not a gender assigned. It could be two men, two women. So some transgender people prefer that. But most transgender people prefer the pronoun of the gender they identify as. But some people misgender them. So they don't know and they're afraid to ask, what pronoun should I use? And the other thing, it's a very simple thing, but yet incredibly important in the transgender community, is bathrooms. And having bathrooms that you feel comfortable using. Here at City Hall, when I was first elected, we only had male or female bathrooms. And a person that works in this building came to me and said, I am transgender, and I don't feel comfortable always using the restroom because I feel like people look at me like, is this the right bathroom? Are you in the right place? And so we have now a gender-neutral bathroom on the first floor of City Hall, which means that and the sign is incredibly important because, see, there's these little things for the transgender community. So when we first did the gender-neutral bathroom, the city put a sign that said family restroom on it. Mm-hmm. The person came to me and said, well, I'm not a family, I'm a single person. And so, now we have a sign that just has symbols. So it has a symbol of a male, a woman, a person in a wheelchair, and a person with a child. So it's now, it's clear that anyone can use this restroom and feel comfortable.
So unisex wouldn't have covered all of that?
Unisex, but the words I think are things that we should go away from, and the symbols are much more clear that this is a way that this person that looks like any of these should feel comfortable using the restroom.
Understood. Pictures.
Yep.
Take it back to elementary.
Exactly.
Keep
Yeah.
it simple. Keep it simple.
Yep.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to continue our discussion on the transgender community and LGBT with our guest from PFLAG and, of course, our city council members, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to InFocus. I'm your host, Chris Stiles, and our guests are from PFLAG and City Hall, our city council member. Welcome back. So here we are. There's so many questions. I have so many questions about LGBTQ, and then there's QIA, and then there's just LGBT. There's a lot of different variations in there, pretty much meaning the same thing for the most part, trying to cover all of the entire spectrum. But speaking of transgender, I know that some people say, I was either born gay or, I like this, that, and the other. I like them both. It doesn't make a difference. When does someone realize or recognize, or how young can they be and come out and say, hey, I think I should be a boy or a girl?
That happens very early. One of the best resources in Cincinnati is a clinic at Children's Hospital, and they deal with kids from 5 to 7 to 17 or 20, maybe 24, I think.
24.
Yeah, but we have, as PFLAG, we hear from parents who are dealing with their children with all kinds of sexual orientation and gender identity issues. But we've had our speakers and parents call who children at the preschool want to dress or play the games of the stereotypical opposite gender. And of course, sometimes that may not be indication of gender identity issue, but just what they like. On the other hand, it may well be a gender identity issue, and the rewarding thing is to talk to parents who recognize it and are trying to sort it out and do what's right for the child. And there are, as I say, there's some really good resources in Cincinnati to help folks deal with that.
So Chris, how much of a challenge is that in our community here that you've seen as far as either young people, even older people? What are some of the challenges that we face?
Well, it's incredibly difficult for young people or people who are older for different reasons. I mean, young people who are feeling something that is different than what's expected of them. And as we said, Children's is great at identifying if it is a phase. I mean, there's many young people who like to play with dolls that are a boy, or girls that like to play in dirt, and they're not transgender. It's just part of who they are. So the clinic is very good at figuring out if this person is transgender and what that means, or if it's just a tomboy or a boy that likes playing with dolls. But it's really difficult growing up knowing that you are different from who you're expected to be, and how do you deal with that? Who you can trust? What does it mean in terms of being able to express your sexual orientation or gender identity, and what ramifications that will have, if any? It leads to a lot of, as we know, young people who developing depression and anxiety, some who commit suicide because of this. The amount of LGBT people who do have these either depression, anxiety, or commit suicide, the numbers are drastically increased from the other community. And then as an adult who has not come out until later in life, you have to deal with the issues of the people who are around you, your family. You haven't been honest with them, and you feel like you don't want to disappoint them. You don't want to feel like they've known the wrong person, but you also want to be true to yourself, and you want them to know you. You want them to know the real you. And so there are a lot of issues that people have to deal with when they're deciding, who exactly they are and how to come out to the people that they love. So
how dangerous is it? I can imagine that it's enough turmoil going on inside of you trying to figure out, which way you're going. But then when you put it out there, how dangerous is it for a transgender as opposed to someone who may be a lesbian, gay, or bisexual?
Right. I think there's different, I think today the gay and lesbian community has a much easier time than the transgender community. And, the transgender community, when you are confident as a young person that you are transgender, it's important that you do have necessary medical care to help you transition as early as possible, because a big part of the transgender community is what's called passing, is being able to go out in public and present as the gender you identify with, and people not feeling like they're seeing a transgender person. And so the earlier that you can start on the medically necessary care, the better. But getting access to that is incredibly difficult.
I was gonna say, that's not covered under regular family insurance or anything.
Under many of them it is.
Really?
And under the city's insurance plan it now is.
Ooh, well, how much of it is covered? I mean, is it just basic? What's covered?
Well, and that's kind of going, one of the things that the transgender community does not like to do is talk about the sex organs and sex in general, in your body. So what I will say is that if a doctor deems it medically necessary, that is covered by most insurance policies. And so that could include, gender reassignment surgeries or hormone therapies, things that are medically necessary to transition to the gender that you are.
What is the government here doing about that to keep everyone safe?
So, we have protections. The city has done everything possible to protect LGBT people. So our hate crimes ordinance includes transgender or gender identity or expression. We offer transgender inclusive health care. We have one of the only full-time police liaisons to the LGBT community, police officer Angela Vance. And it's incredible. So when this woman was shot in the face because she's transgender, the people who were at her bedside were, besides her family, were Angela Vance, the police officer, and Lindsay Deaton, who is a local member of our transgender community. So we've done a good job of being able to respond to the needs, but we have to do a better job of talking to our friends and families and colleagues about why it is okay to be transgender, or it is okay to be different, and how we can be better allies so that violence and discrimination never happen to begin with.
So what are some of the resources that LGBTQ can turn to for help for those people who have not either come out yet or haven't figured out which way to go?
Well, on the transgender side, there is a group called Heartland Trans Wellness. And in fact, I think one of their representatives was supposed to be here today, but had something come up that they had to cancel at the last minute. Another, Lindsay Deaton has started a youth group called the Diverse City Youth Chorus. So that's certainly one. On the wider GLBT, GLSEN, that's the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network, works, and they work in the K-12 and to some extent supporting groups in the universities, colleges and universities, but they sponsor a youth group which meets weekly, and that covers the whole LGBT spectrum.
Did you say that was a broadcast? That's a television broadcast?
No. It's an organization. It's a national organization, and we have a very strong GLSEN chapter here in Cincinnati. Some places, PFLAG deals with youth issues, but here we collaborate with and support GLSEN in their efforts, because they are really into the schools. They do training for faculty and staff in schools. They run a youth summit every fall, a couple hundred youth in the wider Cincinnati area. So, as I say, that's another resource that folks should be aware of.
How important is education for everybody else?
That's the most critical element of all of this. For people who want to be allies, or who have family members they want to support, or LGBT people in general, it's all about having a conversation and being willing to maybe be a little uncomfortable or not knowing all the answers, but being willing to listen and reach out to actually try to find the answers. I mean, that's the most incredible and most important part of this. And I will say that some of the things, the challenges that the transgender community are facing is that we don't have all of the resources. So we have this incredible children's hospital clinic, but it's only for people who are about 5 to 24 years old. And there's only a couple family physicians that are comfortable and that accept transgender clients. One of the things that we are doing right now, it's not ready, it's probably not going to be ready till the end of the year, is that the city has many health clinics that we fund. 35,000 people go through them every year. We don't know that we've ever had a transgender identified client. And it's because they either haven't identified as transgender or they didn't feel comfortable coming to one of our clinics. So we are taking some pretty big, and this is maybe announcing the first time here, but some pretty big but incredibly important steps to making sure that all of our clinics are prepared and know how to treat and are good allies to our transgender community that will feel comfortable then going to our city clinics.
That will be wonderful. I guess that would mean maybe we're going to add the little boxes that have either the
Right.
T or the LGBTQ in it.
And there's a lot of training for doctors on how to deal. That's the most of this is going to be training for doctors, nurses, the people intake clients. It's all about, there's a lot of medically different things that you have to understand to be able to treat transgender patients that we're going to do. And it's going to maybe be the first city in the country that has a fully inclusive health center network for the trans community.
Ooh, Cincinnati's going to be progressive.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so quickly, maybe a website, PFLAG, where can we find more information?
Our local group is PFLAG Cincy, that's PFLAGCINCI.org.
Perfect.
The national was just pflag.org. And there's a tremendous amount of information there, resources. We have publications that people can download or purchase.
Okay.
And you can find me by Googling my name, Chris Seelbach, and it'll lead you to the city of Cincinnati's webpage that has all my contact information on it.
Perfect. Great show, great information. Thanks so much for joining us for another edition of InFocus. For more information, just log on to the city's website. I'm your host, Chris Stiles, and I will see you next time.